It was just so interesting being part of the build of the finance function at Rockefeller and being part of the projections. They knew where they wanted to go. It's just wild to see like how far we've come.
We recognize genius wherever it exists. And if you're known by the company you keep, we are proud to not only spotlight the women that are part of Rockefeller Capital Management's unique network, but also welcome our brilliant audience members.
Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Esposito, Chief Client Officer at Rockefeller Global Family Office, and welcome back to Genius Loves Company. Everyone has a story to tell, and we're excited to hear those from some of Rockefeller's top private advisors, investors, and senior leaders about the life and career experiences that got them here and the insights and perspectives they've gained. With me today is Alison Schachter, Chief Financial Officer of Rockefeller Capital Management. Alison joined the firm in 2019 and was named CFO in 2022. She oversees the firm's financial strategy and operations and brings decades of experience across asset management, wealth management, and trust and fiduciary businesses, all of which we're going to dig into today. Welcome, Alison. So pleased to have you here today.
Thank you, Laura. I'm excited to be here and even more excited to try my very first podcast.
Ooh, I was wondering if this was your inaugural podcast.
It is.
All right, we're going to have fun. But we want our listeners to get to know you. You are in this coveted position as a chief financial officer
Of Rockefeller, nonetheless.
Storied organization like Rockefeller Capital Management with over 140 years of history. So you know, because you've been a listener of the podcast, but we like to ground ourselves in history. We don't have to go back the 140 years of Rockefeller history necessarily, but we are going to go back in Alison history. So we want to start at the beginning. We want to hear a little bit about, you grew up in upstate New York. How did that environment influence the way you thought about both discipline and creativity?
So I did grow up in the Binghamton area, outside of Binghamton, in a town called Appalachian. But I went to Vestal High School, which was the neighboring town. And, you know, as we talk about where I went to school later, I did attend Binghamton University, formerly known as SUNY Binghamton. And I was a little bit considered a townie because I lived so close. But I had that on-campus experience, but I could still bring my laundry home 20 minutes, down the road. So that part, was beautiful. But yes, I grew up. I am the middle child. I have an older sister, younger brother. Grew up, my father was a pretty much lifetime IBMer. So he was an engineer/MBA. He did kind of both sides of the sciences as well as the business. And my mother was home with us. She was a teacher pre-children. And when we all grew older, she went back to teaching and she found herself in a elementary school orchestra position role, which was very fitting because there was a lot of music in my house. Growing up with a mother who's a musician, we have a piano. All of us learned to play the piano. All of us, except my brother, learned to play the violin. I played the violin through high school, competed, played with the little symphonies in the local towns and had all that music as part of my life. And even today, when I think about what I need to kind of calm down, if I'm just working late and I just want something to listen to, no words, because you don't want to get into the lyrics, I put on that classical. I put on like that Yo-Yo Ma, some cello concertos, and just,
That's my favorite.
Just kind of like relax and just dig into what I have to dig into.
Oh my gosh. See? How did I not know this about you? Okay, wait, there are so many things to unpack here.
Yes.
Do you still play today?
My parents both roll their eyes, but I do not. I just do not. I still have a violin in my house.
I was going to ask you, do you have a piano?
I do have a piano. It's not a beautiful grand, but I have a daughter. And when she went to kindergarten, she started saying, I want to play the piano. And I said, sure you do. Let's see how long this lasts before we invest in anything. And sure enough, she, started on a keyboard. She was very adamant. She wanted to keep playing. So we've done the lessons and she's played since kindergarten. So we did buy her a piano. And the deal is you will play until you leave the house.
And so does that happen?
She has not left the house yet. She still plays, but she is talented, comes from my mother. We are down to probably 5 minutes of practice a day. And she also competed. She's played in Lincoln Center. She's played in Carnegie Hall. She is very talented, but she does it because we force her to. But deep inside, I know she feels the connection. Yeah. And I do think someday she'll recognize it's calming. And if you play piano for 13 years, like it will stay with you.
Wow.
And you can pick it up as you're older. And as I know, when my life slows down, maybe I will pick up a violin or a piano again. Maybe I won't.
Yeah.
But it's in our house as well.
I had no idea. That's so extraordinary.
Yeah.
But this makes so much sense because my husband is also a musician and he is a mathematical genius. And
they say it's connected.
Exactly. So now this makes so much sense to me. Okay. But talk a little bit more about your father's influence.
What I really remember about my life growing up, and maybe it's most people growing back in that generation, but I remember him driving up the street at whatever time every evening, and we would all come in from inside, from playing outside, and we would all sit down to dinner together.
Yeah.
And that's what I remember. And then we would have the news on, and we'd sit and watch the news, or we'd sit and watch this. And just that quality dinner time is really what I also, remember from growing up. And the fact that, they both made it a priority to make the three of us to sit down to eat. I think it's easier said than done in that generation, but, that really stands with me as well.
What was dinner conversation?
Oh, I don't remember, but it's the fact that, we were there. We were present. She cooked it, and, he always pushed me. He pushed all of us as I, grew my career and graduated from school, et cetera. He'd be like, so what are you doing next? What are you doing next? And we'd be just walking around somewhere, and he'd be like, well, did you see this program? And did you see this program? And he's the one that really kept pushing me, like, I know you're out of college, but what are you going to do now? Why are you not sitting for the CPA? And you're like, okay, I'm going to sit for the CPA. I don't think he really knew he was doing it, but he was kind of keep pushing. But he went to school, got his undergrad, had kids, went back to school, got his MBA. So it's kind of ingrained in him, too, that you keep going.
Yes.
And so that's, just kind of what
So it sounds like a
followed.
Constant state of learning.
And trying to better yourself, open all those doors. Yeah.
And was he the same way with your siblings, too?
A little bit. We're all very, very different. But, everybody takes different things from nurture versus nature, et cetera.
Yeah. At that stage, if I had asked you, if the dinner conversation was, what do you want to be when you grow up? What would the answer have been?
So high school years, going into college, I wanted to be an anesthesiologist. I don't remember exactly why, but I just thought, it's a good balance between science, medicine. I don't know why. I have nothing further than that, but that's what I intended to do, and I went to school.
So you were thinking med school?
Yeah. And so you go to your first semester, and your semester is, calculus, chemistry, bio, and thank goodness I put in a sociology class in there because by the end of that first semester, my grades were horrific. And, we had a little, okay, so you might want to do this, but can your brain process that way? Or are you having too much fun? What is the problem here? So you try semester number 2, it doesn't really change. And so you realize, I need to take a step back. I need to realize, this isn't going to work as much as I want it to. Yeah. And I, kind of changed course and applied to the School of Management at Binghamton. And that's kind of where I landed.
So you transferred into the business school sophomore year. Okay.
Something like that. And I had taken accounting class in high school. Yeah. And I ended up as, an accounting graduate.
Wow. All right. And what were you going to do as an accounting graduate? Was it, very linear, the course that was charted out for you?
I think it comes back to I'm a little bit of a practical person. And as an accountant, you can likely find a job anywhere, unless you really specialize. If you want to go into government, if you want to go into nonprofit, maybe they're a little nichey, but an accountant is a little bit of an accountant is a little bit of an accountant. So, Practical Allison thought that was, a really great way to make sure when we get out of school, we're going to have a job and we just take it from there and see what happens. And sure enough, that's what I did.
Very middle child of you.
Oh, funny.
Funny. Practical one, the pragmatic one.
Yes. Well, here's something not super practical. So senior year in college, I had an internship with a company, a government defense contractor, and they offered me a job in Arlington, Texas. Okay. And I said, okay, interesting. Also going through on-campus recruiting, for, big 4 firms in the city opportunities. And I said, okay, interesting. So I accepted Texas, went through the recruiting process. But in the back of my mind, I said, there's no way I'm going to Texas and there's no way I'm going to New York City because I'm 21 years old and I am in love and I'm going to follow a boy to Atlanta. At the end of the day, I broke the news to my parents that this is what I really want and I need help trying to figure out how to do it.
This was college boyfriend?
This was college boyfriend. I just went with it. And here we are, 25 plus years married, kids. And it was definitely, a risk, but that's what happens. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So what did you do in Atlanta?
Another funny story. Think about last year in college, right? And you're in your fancy interview suit, which is so foreign to you, but you're still so proud to wear it, right? All dressed up. And, my parents helped me get a plane ticket to fly to Atlanta.
So your parents were supportive, loving your parents.
They were supportive because it was like, all right, I'm going to like go try to find a job.
Yeah.
And then we'll have a discussion if I don't find a job.
Okay.
Right. So
They too are practical.
They too are practical. So line up what I'm young and naive. And I go, okay, I'll have a recruiter that I'm going to meet with. This is going to be perfect. I'm going to be done, like come home with a job. And so I meet with this recruiter and we go over my resume. And then she says, well, I can't put you in front of any clients today unless you have something else to wear. And I was like, I don't understand. And she's like, you're in pants. And I was like, I don't understand. Like, what does this matter? But that really stuck with me to this day. And you can probably count the times you have ever seen me in a skirt or a dress because I thought that was so far-fetched, ridiculous. And needless to say, I did not come home with a job, but it all still worked out.
I wish the audience could see us because my
you are in a skirt today.
My mouth is agape. But I am in a skirt, but I am so rarely in skirts too. I always wear, more often than not, wear pants because I too had that same experience. That is wild.
It is wild. And then, I was fortunate enough to go back, took a different approach, blah, blah. And I did land a job.
Yep.
So
doing what?
I was a junior accountant for a agriculture equipment manufacturer, but it was just not my cup of tea and I could not see myself there. I just moved on.
Yeah.
And as an accountant, right, practical, everybody, until we see this transformation of AI, right?
Right.
It was pretty not simple, but it was, not bad to go look for a job.
Yeah. So did you have your sights set on a particular industry?
I did not.
Okay.
It took me a little while to find financial services. Another step that I made while living in Atlanta was a firm called CheckFree, which was the first online bill presentment services firm.
That was early internet. What a leap of faith on your part. But this is interesting because then there's an element of your father and his technology and engineering background, and maybe that's too much of a stretch.
Yeah, but they were very technology forward.
Yeah, like a fintech firm at that stage.
Yeah, from the client perspective as well as in-house. I remember they did a complete overhaul of their accounting system. They brought in consultants, like 30 of them, and it was months and months to install SAP. And, just seeing that and being part of that transformation, it really, is still, I was young, put the emphasis on, process in my mind. And you really have to think about workflows and you have to think big picture. And, so it really started kind of putting me on the path to like being more than just an accountant.
Yeah, those are huge lessons at a young age to glean from that experience. Okay, so what was the path after that?
From CheckFree, the husband and I decided we were, at some point we were going to look to have children and we were going to look to move back to the Northeast.
Okay.
So
was he also from
He's from Long Island. So
his
parents, were still in the Northeast. So we took an opportunity to reload with his firm and we ended up back in the Northeast. And so we're all very happy with that. And then, shortly after, I took a job in another startup company, different from fintech, different from financial services by all means, but it was a startup growth company.
Okay.
And it was physical therapy. So it was a group of physical therapists that turned business owners that got capital, and they were buying, chains such as Rehab Associates and kind of aggregating them all up. It's really, it wasn't really the sector necessarily, but it was more of the environment of here you are, change, right? How do you implement? How do you continue to grow? How do you grow correctly? And that was really where I came in to kind of lead and make sure, fold everything in, pick systems, work it out, get through the audits and, build the team and build the finance function.
You were willing to take risks in your career. And I often think of characterization.
Practical safe, Alison?
Exactly.
Calculate a risk by all means.
So how did you finally get into financial services?
So from there, I went to a financial services firm called Gartmore Global Investments.
Yeah, of course.
Which was the global investment arm of Nationwide Insurance.
Right.
That was really my first forte. And that was great getting into financial services, getting into funds, getting into broker-dealer. I got my FINRA license. And that was, still a young company, very exciting. It was a very technical accounting role. So that was a lot of great experience. And from there, I moved to Morgan Stanley. I worked in there supporting their alternatives from a finance perspective. And once again, it was at the stage of Morgan Stanley where they bought a hedge fund. They purchased minority stakes in other hedge funds.
Yeah.
And, I was kind of a big piece of pulling it all together, integrating people, systems, bringing their accounting into the Morgan Stanley infrastructure. And that was really fun and exciting.
A build and an integration.
And I went to work one day And my manager said, so what do you think about moving to Connecticut and being on site at Front Point? And I was like, interesting. Yes, the hedge fund. I went home one day to my hubby and I go, so what do you think? We have like a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. Are we ready to go? And he was like, sure, let's go. So Morgan Stanley reloaded us up to Connecticut. And here's where I have been for the last, 17 years.
Wow.
Something like that. And that was, very exciting. And Front Point, brought it into Morgan Stanley. And then they spun back out, which was, I think, the whole premise of me going on site. So it's thinking about cash, capital, budgeting, forecasting. What is our new system for spinning out? So once again, it's doing a little bit of the same of, kind of planning, project work, leading. And here we are.
Let's come up to present day. So hedge fund.
I moved to another hedge fund family office for a few years.
Okay.
And then I was looking for a new opportunity and, got connected to Ed Moriarty, who everybody knew from Morgan Stanley. I didn't meet him personally, but there was definitely some overlap.
Okay.
And I asked for an introduction and I was like, I'm looking for something new. And we had a great conversation. I came in and I thought it was a great fit. And this was for head of FP&A role back in 2019.
Wow. You've had a meteoric rise between 2019 FP&A to now in 2022 being named CFO of the firm.
Yeah.
So talk to us about that.
So I remember when I left that, or maybe it was like in a follow-up email, and he said, let's build a world-class, reporting regime. And I was like, I'm so into that. I've built it. I've done the accounting, but let's learn how to slice and dice it and really tell the message, to people. And it was just so interesting, being part of the build of the finance function at Rockefeller and being part of the projections. They knew where they wanted to go, and to taking that model and turning it into a, said bottoms-up budget, and then, tracking to it with a 5-year projection was a big undertaking for all of us. It's just wild to see, like, how far we've come. We are so much more sophisticated in every aspect of Rockefeller than 2019. And yes, my role has evolved, but every single role here at Rockefeller has evolved.
There are so many different directions we can go in because the role, it's so tactical on kind of on a micro day-to-day basis, but then there's a very strategic long-term goal you've had to navigate in such a short period of time to turn the data into information.
Yeah, but I've technically done that a little bit everywhere I've been, right? Like that is the sign of, someone who's more than just a processor, right?
Yes.
To be able to add the analysis and the thinking. So here it definitely, it's taken to another level. But another thing that I've learned here, you want to get into the details. You want to make sure, you're doing everything precisely and you're taking everything into account when you turn that data into information. But sometimes you're just missing like the overall message because you're working too hard. As a leader, you have to really be able to put yourself in that level. Like, that's all great, but what does this really say,
Right. What's the main takeaway?
Yeah.
So you've got a big team now. How many folks in the finance
There's about 35 colleagues within our finance organization across 5 offices.
Okay.
The team works hard. They deliver good quality results. Everybody, is proud of them and likes to work with them, I like to say. And, I think we express that culture of collegiality and excellence and collaboration.
Enterprise-wide mindset always has been my experience working with you and your colleagues.
That's 100% right, and I hope it stays. Easier said than done.
I know. I want to ask a question that we often like to ask of folks, just given what Rockefeller Capital Management stands for and our role in terms of helping our clients manage their financial wealth. When you think about your early influences, mostly from your parents, what's your earliest memory of money and how did that experience really shape the way you think about financial responsibility today?
So 2 things come to mind. One, when I used to babysit after school for 3 children, including making them dinner, $2.50 an hour.
What?
Right?
Binghamton, they were getting a deal on you.
That's right. So that is my memory of money that it was very hard to come by.
Okay, so $2.50 an hour.
3 kids, yeah.
Right.
Right. And then on the flip side, I remember, black and white newspapers where it would list the exchanges and the stocks and the tickers. And I remember going through them and just like picking names and like building this paper portfolio.
What?
But you weren't doing it based on research. There wasn't anything.
No, of course not.
You were just picking
these letters are cool.
Coca-Cola. Xerox, or like Tiffany's. And then it was kind of like, let's just see what happens.
Who showed you that section
My
of the
father
newspaper?
did. My father did.
So did he invest? Did he invest in the market?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I remember, tracking that, but it's only on paper.
I bet some of these things were what you were talking about at the dinner table. And you're trying to evade me on what you were talking about. But you were talking about the stock market. This makes so much more sense.
Or was it the fact that Alison likes to count money?
Okay.
Right? So it could go many different ways.
When did you start investing? Did you start investing personally?
I don't remember. I think I did, as $2.50 an hour, not really, but birthday money, Christmas money. I think it went into
mutual
the savings
funds. Account passbook.
I'm
remember
sure
that
I had a little checkbook. I don't remember a savings account passbook. But that's definitely very early on.
Saving for something in particular?
I don't remember saving for anything in particular. It's not certainly because I had it all and I didn't have to work hard for what I got, except for, you wanted to buy gifts for your parents and send them out to dinner on their anniversary. I remember, those little things where you slide away some of your allowance or your babysitting money. But I do have a very savvy son who is my oldest child, now a sophomore in college, and he started a business, during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So 10th grade in high school. And he actually worked and hustled really hard where he made significant money that it became a tax, challenge for all of us. But, he had savings and spending aspirations.
Yeah.
And, I really forced him. And he learned a little bit in high school because he took, said accounting and said finance class. But I was just like, when you're making this money and, there are tax consequences of it. So you need to actually show me what you're doing. I want to see a financial statement. You're telling me all this, but show me where's your support for how much revenue you have and where is that going, when the IRS comes, says, guardian of said child, show me this.
Right.
And so, it was interesting to teach him how to be so operationally detailed and be like, you want to do this, then you need to kind of do it correctly and learn how to build an income statement. And we talked about margins, which always come into play.
Of course.
And every, few months you'd be like, oh, I'm doing this and this should give me, X amount of bump. I've changed my product or I'm doing a partnership with, said supplier and I won't have to pay for it anymore. So it was really exciting to kind of see, live it through his life. And because he didn't babysit, he didn't work, for an hourly minimum wage tip. He built his own business. He is a hustler by all means.
He is an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Your daughter, does she have this in her?
My daughter, she has a different, lifestyle. She is a competitive squash player. So she does not have the time to have real part-time job. She's on the court a lot. Plus she's still in high school, which, is a very big focus in our household. And she's graduating this year and she was actually recruited to play squash in college. So you have to hold the bar differently, right? But we do hold the 5 minutes of piano.
Okay, right. Of course. There's still space for that. That's important.
Yes.
You were in so many startup, kind of high growth environments. And what were your key takeaways when you think about scale, when you think about innovation and adapting quickly?
I think you either a little bit have it in you or you don't, right? You have to learn how to adapt really quickly or, everything is going to just fly by you. And I think as you kind of mature your skill set and become more broad-minded, you recognize when things are coming down the pipeline and you can be more proactive than reactive. But you also in the mindset, and I try to, keep telling the finance organization and as well as my personal life is you just have to be ready for change.
So were you good with change?
In certain things, I'm good with change. And in certain things, I'm absolutely not good with change.
Yeah.
Right. But, change is inevitable. And think about what's going on right now with AI. Right?
Yeah.
We all need to be open. We need to be front-footed. We need to be researching and we need to be ready for it.
Yeah.
Right? We need to bring it on because it's not just going to come and find you. If you want to stay ahead and you want to stay best in class, you have to. So you really have to just be willing to, I did this 2 months ago, but now I need to rethink it. And that's I think, a little bit of, you have to live your life a little. Kids are the same way. I think, see what works.
Couldn't agree more. Again, kind of look back at this stage of your career. Look, you are still incredibly young and you have a lot of career left in you and a lot of contributions I know you will continue to make. As you reflect on what brought you to this point, big picture, how did each chapter really lead to you being in the position you are today as CFO of Rockefeller Capital Management?
I think one word comes to mind, and it's resilient. I mean, you have to just realize, what are your boundaries and what can you take? And is someone else having a bad day and you're just, falling victim to it? And you just got to shake it off, become resilient, and really focus on, is this really the right thing for you? And if it is, then you just roll with it.
And do you apply that in your personal life too?
Yes, easier said than done, 100%, because I think in your personal life, like it is your personal life, right? And that's all like what's deep inside you. Not that work is not deep inside you and equally as important, but I think it is different. Just being up to challenges, I've had those along the way, being ready for change, being ready for problems, and just being part of that change is really, what has helped me, be in the role I am today.
Yeah, no doubt. So as you reflect, Alison, what's the best financial advice you've ever received?
So something top of mind is actually from my advisor here at Rockefeller. When, going through everything, he kind of proposed something that put me out of my risk level a little. And, so I took it away. And of course, I wanted this more than anything because it was a little bit of like, you can spend this money, Alison. And I was like, well, practical Alison says, I really probably don't want to spend this money. And, we talked it over, and the hubby and I talked it over. And we made a decision, based on, our own comfort level and his, modeling how they produce every Monte Carlo simulation to show you the probability of X, Y, and Z, that this is likely going to be fine. And you just need to, slightly adjust your risk tolerance and, not think about it as risky. And that was, one of the most exciting things, because what we did at the end result of that conversation, we bought a second home. It's a very modest second home in Charleston, which is another happy place. But without that conversation, it was in our back of mind, but it would have been like 10 years down the road, post-paying for college, this is what we're going to do. And it's not because we have a lot of wealth, but it was really just like putting the pieces together.
Yeah, exactly. So as a pants-wearing working mom in a deadline-driven field, what have you learned about prioritization, trade-offs, and being intentional with your time?
I think that last part of what you said is key. You have to be intentional with your time. I mean, we are incredibly deadline-driven to so many things, right? And you can only plan and pipeline so much, and it just never goes according to plan. So you just have to be intentional. And, I try to say, when I'm somewhere, I'm that way, right? Like if I'm at work, then I'm at work, and I'm not going to be thinking about what's on the grocery list or, what are we doing this weekend? But
I admire that in people.
Got to be focused. It's a fine balance, but, you get 24 hours in a day.
Yep.
You can't do it all. As long as you realize you can't do it all, nothing is set in stone. You can change course in a few weeks.
Do you require sleep?
I do need sleep. And point fact, I need sleep. And everybody in the world will be able to tell when I don't get sleep. So, I also just prioritize that. And if it means like I'm not watching TV or I'm not, whatever, then that's kind of what I sacrifice, I try to, be intentional during my waking hours, and then just realize I can't do anything.
I mean, you're helping your kids run businesses. You are very busy.
I am busy, but I will also add something that I'm super proud of. I am intentional at work and at play. And when my child was in London for his first year, it was not intentional, but I saw him every single month from August to May when he was gone. I didn't realize it till like the spring. And then I told him, I go, do you realize I've seen you every single month? And it might be that I hustled in a hotel or I went to our London office, but that was intentional, right? And that just made me feel so proud. If you work really hard, you can figure out how to have it all. This technology that we have in this world, you can work from almost anywhere. And that, I think, is key.
That's
really a game changer.
All right. So to close this out with a question that we love to ask of folks, although I'm already starting to get a sense. But Alison, what does an ideal Saturday morning look like for you?
So I do live, an ideal, top of mind is living in Connecticut. I do have a quintessential Connecticut backyard with rock walls, hydrangea trees, and bushes.
Oh.
When I, wake up when you want to wake up, pour that cup of coffee, and just like go listen to the birds and relax for an hour. Like that is, just calming.
Yeah.
That makes me happy.
Yeah. Well, there's something so grounding about it. I love that. Alison, this was such a treat.
It was so fun.
I can't wait for everyone to hear the story, get to know you a little bit better, learn about your journey. It's fascinating. So thank you so much for joining us, being really open to this. And thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you for listening to Genius Loves Company. To learn more about Rockefeller Capital Management, visit rockco.com or keep up with us on LinkedIn or Instagram. This material was prepared by Rockefeller Capital Management. The views expressed of the hosts and guests in this episode are as of a particular point in time and are subject to change without notice. The views expressed by the speakers are solely their own and may differ from or conflict with those of other divisions in Rockefeller Capital Management. This information was provided for illustrative and educational purposes only. It should not be construed as an investment recommendation, investment advice, an offer of Rockefeller investment advisory or brokerage services, or a projection or illustration of the performance of any particular investment or strategy offered by Rockefeller. Forward-looking statements, including those presented herein, are inherently uncertain, as future events may differ materially from those reflected, and past performance is not a guarantee of future performance.